Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well. This Tuesday, January 9, 2024. We're meeting today to obviously talk about BTC, to talk about crypto, to talk a little bit about macro because there's still a lot going on and it's starting right away. We'll start with Gary Gensler's tweet, which tells us that the ETF is validated. So no, it's not exactly that. But in any case, he tells us that we must be careful when investing in crypto, that it is very dangerous, etc., etc. In short, a warning tweet which simply tells us that the validation will take place, and that it will certainly take place today or tomorrow. We don't forget that the deadline is 10, it's Wednesday. And BlackRock, as a reminder of yesterday's news, tells us that it's Wednesday. So there we have Gary Gensler, who simply tells us that it's validated. So in his own way, yes. But in this case, it is validated. We had a big reaction behind the price directly. We went to 45,000. Finally, we broke the 45,000. We will discuss it a little later in the technical part. In terms of announcements, too, we have the reduction in fees, and that is very interesting in the sense that ETFs are starting to fight the fees. For those who don't know, ETFs are companies that own collateral assets. So, for example, in our case, it will be Bitcoin. And behind it, we actually sell the shares of this company. That's what we buy and that's what we sell. But the holding of these shares is charged by the company itself, 0.3 for BlackRock. Grayscale 1.5 means that every year there is 0.3 that arrives in BlackRock's pocket from the total amount that is blocked and allocated to its fund. So it's huge. It's a financial windfall that is just colossal. And what is interesting to see is that we have a grayscale which is at 1.5. They went from 2 to 1.5 in view of the competition. And yes, there is still a lot of competition when you look at the costs. 1.5 is by far the most expensive grayscale. Then we have 0.25 for ARK. We have 0.30 for Ether. So they actually have minimal fees under certain conditions. We have 0.24 for Bitwise, 0.25 for VanEck, 0.5 for WisdomTree. And we have Franklin, who is at 0.29, but overall, really, there is a very strong war in terms of costs. iShare, in all cases, is going to be the cheapest, or Acera, whatever happens to be the cheapest, or in any case, really be in the lower bracket, because we know very well that iShare is BlackRock. And BlackRock generally tends to drain the volume, so we are really going to have very low fees to be able to drain a maximum of volume, because we still have a lot of people who are positioned above. So we will have a very strong war. Please note that when there is the launch of BTC, we are talking about the start of trading on this BTC, in any case on these ETFs, which will be very rapid. So I'm going to go back and find the news it was in the tweet if I don't say anything stupid about Goku. That's what can be traded as quickly as Thursday or Friday, so really weekend in which we can have an addition of liquidity. And it is this news that caused the cumulative price to react enormously with the SEC's tweet, because we precisely thought that there was going to be a little time before having the possibility of having the liquidity and the funds coming in. On the ETF, a priori it will be very quick weekend. And on that we had other news which was added that on the ETFs we should have between 50 and 100 million which should be injected in 2024. So that in this case is the Chartered Bank Standard which gives us this information. Once again, it's an estimate, and then we will have VanEck who explains to us that they are going to side with $72 million. So that means that by the end of the week, we should already have a pre-idea or a side which will be carried out OTC. Once again, I remind you that the purchase of these BTC will not be done on the market. It will be done OTC. This implies directly over the counter, outside of market prices, which is rather classic given the volumes which will be traded to avoid having too strong an explosion in price. On the other hand, we will always have the problem of liquidity. We have already known about this liquidity problem for some time. The number of BTC available for exchange is really drastically low compared to everything we have known, and the more it goes, the more it will be the case. So we are in a liquidity problem to see how the market will react, despite the fact that exchanges are carried out over the counter. Then we have on the macro part 8 chips which will benefit from AI. Once again, this is the expectation that I explained to you last week, the narrative that will arrive at the US level. If you haven't seen Saturday's video, I really invite you to watch it. There we are starting to have a certain number of actions which are starting to be put in place around this, and which is rather logical because we are going to have the whole tech part, which will be driven by AI, the whole industry part. which will turn to the necessary tools to be able to help artificial intelligence to develop. So we will have a whole economic point which will begin to accelerate, and that is what will be interesting and important to see. Especially since we see that we had a day yesterday which was very, very strong on the S&P 500. Obviously, we had such a strong bearish breakout. We see that we are going to retrace, and we have, in fact, included the previous candle is really important because it is a signal which shows us that despite everything that is happening, the S&P 500 is really very strong. So this is also the case on the Nasdaq. But we could also explain it by a withdrawal here of the dollar, in which we still find a dollar index, which is rejected by the Kumo, which is rather classic if we remove Ishimoku to have a slightly more general vision. We see that here we are in a rejection phase to potentially go and retest a little bit lower than the 100. We're going to wait until we actually have confirmation this weekend, but in this case, we're going to have a dollar index that's going to be a little weaker over the coming days, and obviously that's positive for stocks. This implies that we will have liquidity that will be freed up in risk areas, stocks, and behind BTC. BTC, which is also benefiting from this fall in the dollar, so which is rather positive to be able to see this surge, the surge that we have seen. So another thing is that this surge, still this same graph, which is the representation of the S&P 500 from which we subtracted the monetary printing, we see that the small retracement which had been carried out, we has not even touched this part of resistance. We see that here the support has not yet played its role, and that we are perhaps even in a re-acceleration. So we will follow the weekly closing, which will be very important, which could give us the rise of the bubble, which we expect in particular on artificial intelligence, on the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, which we have in mind, which we will have to monitor, in which we could have a very strong re-acceleration, at least 2024, and in which we could benefit following the retracement on the macro. However, on BTC, we have taken off. We can clearly see the bullish re-acceleration in which we are breaking the previous candle. As I explained to you yesterday, which was really complicated because we had no volatility. Well, clearly we see volatility again. We even see it very, very clearly. But once again, it is a volatility that is daily. We will have to see whether over the week we will really close like that, or will we really have a volatility candle and go much higher to regain volatility. Namely that we normally have the necessary news on ETFs to be able to regain this volatility. We are supposed to have validation of the ETFs. I'm not even talking about the refusal because given what we have had in recent days, we are really moving towards validation. And the question will be how the market will react. There we have a first reaction, a form of consolidation. Are we in this form? So on reaction, extension, consolidation, and then retracement to chase liquidity. Or are we really going to look for more here than the 48? We see that we haven't yet hit the 48. We don't forget 48.51.5 are our targets if we zoom out. We see very clearly that it is still the top here, which was left by Terra Luna, in which we had the consolidation following the breakout at the end of 2021. And then, on January 2022, until in March 2022, we had this whole period of euphoria and retracement with, here, the breakout of Terra Luna, which really hurt the crypto ecosystem, while the macroeconomy, at that time was rather positive. Was even rather bullish during this period with a strong bullish retracement in which we were caught on the wrong side by Terra Luna. The question will be, are we going to look for this liquidity zone to be able to close all the orders that had been left open here or to structure a form of lateralization in the 51-52 to either make us sell the news and sell or consolidate to continue to seek higher, and at that point we could seek relatively high. However, when we look at what happened, we broke this area well. What is interesting to see is that the salt area we went to get it well, we had a very nice pullback which was carried out here on the 44,700. There we had a very big signal, really very big signal on this candle to be able to actually accompany the breakout in which here we did not have an effective distribution. And above all, we did not have not broken at the bottom and consolidated below that, so that implies that there we had a very good signal to accompany the movement. And at the same time, it's a bit normal. When we look at what happened here, we had the liquidation part, which was expected, in which we liquidated this entire part with this bullish acceleration. We filled the part of imbalance which was there. The fact that we are already filling an upper part of the imbalance. This implies that we were going to seek the liquidity of that. There we had a first clue. The fact that we don't stop just here. There we had a first clue. Second thing, when we do the pullback and we have a very nice reaction with a hunt for liquidity here. There we had a second potential indication of a hunt for additional liquidity, because there we necessarily had a lot of shorters who were positioned. We had a lot of shorters who were positioned here on the bearish breakout. In fact, when we had the bearish reaction, we had a lot of people who are positioned here in shorts very aggressively. When we had the fuse here, it was a signal that was rather positive for a very nice rebound if ever it was validated. And we see that we had a very nice rebound and a reacceleration which was also very strong and which was also fueled by a very strong short squeeze. When we look at the liquidations, we were at more than 100 million now in the last 24 hours. But if we had looked in particular last night, for example, when I really looked at the latest liquidation figures, we were at more than 250 million which were liquidated, which was just very, very important carried out on BTC, and therefore these liquidations, there is no need to question too many questions. It was liquidations which created the upward movement, and which favored this movement. And I think that will be the case until 52,052. 1,000 is really a very strong level, and what I am waiting for in any case will be to watch the reaction of the market in relation to the validation of ETFs, because that's it, more or less we don't have the official announcement yet, but we know that it will be the case. I think that many people too are waiting, not necessarily for the validation of the ETFs, but waiting for the injection of liquidity, which will be carried out following the putting online of the ETFs, that is Thursday, Friday, we will say next week. If we ever have a very strong injection of liquidity, we will have a market that will feed itself. If we ever have a liquidity injection that will be very weak, we will have people who will capitulate, and at that point, that's where we will have this sell the news effect, which will be very, very strong. The other thing to note is that we still have this capital injection, which is very strong. As a reminder here, it is the accumulation of all the stable coins present. Well, the big ones in any case, the bust. I put it because, hey, it is always present. If I want to have the state of the previous curve, I have to inject it into it. We have USDT, we have DAI, we have USDC who are present, who are the majors. Since October 16, we have also seen a reacceleration here, and we see that we still took 7 liquidity injections, so it still remains relatively low compared to what we have known. Hop, I'll give you the graph to show you a little bit what it can look like when we really start to accelerate in a very, very limited time. So for me, we are no longer in this phase here. We are not yet in this phase. So that implies that personally we should arrive in the 240, 250, 260. Why not even 300? And it is this addition of liquidity which will be transferred directly to the BTC level. In terms of its dominance, we can clearly see that we have a reacceleration. So for me, it's not enough. I'm just going to close it for now. It's not enough. For me, we should break this high here. Very present. A bit in the same image where we had first acceleration delay, second acceleration delay. The problem is that here we still had a transfer of liquidity which was very violent on altcoins. So we are having a lot of trouble getting going again. Here for me, it's really the target of the 56. We should be around 52,000 when we should be here. And there we will in fact have a new transfer on altcoins. This is a little bit the target that I am aiming for. If this is not the case, it implies that the bull run has not really started yet, because to have the bull run, we must continue to push on BTC. BTC must drain liquidity, especially with an ETF that arrives. This implies that the liquidity goes into the ETF, which will value the ETF, and then the people who are positioned on the ETFs will take their profit to try to value. Altcoins, it's a bit like the usual transfer of liquids. For me, we are still far away. This box, I leave it there. For me, it's really the target to set. And if we compare on BTC, it's a little bit of that. We can clearly see that the first acceleration really gave this enthusiasm here on the BTC. Second acceleration we can clearly see there. And there we can clearly see that we have an acceleration, yes, but we don't actually have of top, which was carried out. And that's really, for me, the question that I'm asking myself is, do we not already have too much liquidity, which is actually spread out in the altcoins, which are distributed almost everywhere? If we look at this, what is happening here, we will see that in fact we already have quite a bit of outperformance. That is to say that reaction of BTC, what is happening, we still have a certain number of altcoins in which we already have outperformance, which is rather positive. But it also means that we still have liquidity shared, and therefore we still do not have any liquidity injection at the BTC level, which is rather at the same time normal, because at present we still do not have the ETFs which are validated. So, for me, it's going to be the reaction of this curve. When we have validation that the ETFs are validated and that the ETFs are tradable, normally we are supposed to have an outpouring of liquidity. This is what the market expects. So, if we don't have a liquidity outpouring, that implies that dominance won't break out to the upside. And so, at that point, we will in fact have a potential signal of failure in terms of the injection of liquidity through ETFs and an overreaction of the market. That's kind of how I'm going to monitor what's going on to determine whether or not we position ourselves. In terms of order flow, not much. We have a little bit of open interest which is growing here and here. But it remains relatively weak, although when we look at what is happening there, we can clearly see that the CVDs are on the rise. This implies that we still have a signal of aggressiveness, of a return of aggressiveness of the market. It still remains relatively weak. We are not actually breaking these tops, and we still have here the CVD spot, which is very present. And that is rather positive. It means that we have people who buy in spot and who maintain the spot for, in fact, all this level of lateralization. We can clearly see that there, we have a spot market which is much more stable than the perpetual. And when we see that it is rather positive, generally we are more likely to have a perpetual which rises, and a spot which decreases, which is rather negative, and here it is rather positive because we have a form of reversal which is in the process of being done, which means that we have a spot positioning which is very aggressive currently. In terms of liquidity, clearly there are not many people who are positioned here in leverage. We see it very well on this map. There we also see it very well here on the map which is there, in which we really have very little of people who are positioned. The only truly leveraged open interest that I can see at the moment is here, on the CME, therefore the Chicago Marketing Exchange, which is the open interest of institutional investors in the future on BTC, in which we see that we have an influx of open interest, which is in the process of being established, therefore of the future. And above all, there was a movement which took place yesterday in lateralization, okay? We went from 575 to 621 at the level of the CME open interface at the time when we were in lateralization. So this means that people positioned themselves once the acceleration was made. So that's interesting to see. It also implies that we could have a liquidation on the CME linked to the positioning. If we ever have a retracement that is too strong, that will be something to watch out for this weekend. As I said on Twitter, be careful, really. If you don't have real risk management, if you don't know what you're doing, above all, don't intervene and don't play on the markets in days coming. Have some popcorn, relax, retire. Of the market, actually look at what is going to happen because it is going to be very interesting. In any case, I think that we will have a lot of manipulation. We will have a lot of back and forth, which risks leading to lots of clearance. Don't get liquidated. Enjoy the show. Whether it's up or down, it doesn't really matter. Simply take the opportunity to analyze what is happening in the lessons. You will see that you will learn enormously. That's all for today. We'll meet up later at 13:30 to talk about Lithium. So a crypto that has outperformed in recent days, we're going to explain why. I already told you about it. We will come back to all this. It's 13:30. Don't forget before leaving to leave me a little like and a comment to support it. It always makes me very happy. And we'll see you later.